Steffi had always believed she understood danger. She had grown up inside it, learned its rhythm, learned how it disguised itself as charm, as redemption, as second chances. Yet what she began to sense between Taylor Hayes and Deacon Sharp felt different. Quieter, slower, and therefore far more terrifying. It was not recklessness that alarmed her but intention. The way they lingered in conversation. The way Taylor's voice softened when Deacon entered a room. The way Deacon looked at her mother not as a temptation but as a possibility. These were not stolen moments. They were foundations being laid. For Steffi, that realization did not ignite anger first. It ignited fear. Not fear for herself, but for her mother. Because Steffi understood something Taylor did not want to see. Proximity to Deacon meant proximity to Sheila Carter. And Sheila did not respond to loss or betrayal with grief. She responded with strategy. Sheila's history was not one of momentary rage but of calculated retaliation. When she felt displaced, she did not lash out blindly. She waited, watched, and then struck where the damage would be permanent. Steffi watched Taylor step closer to danger with eyes wide open and still refusing to acknowledge it. Taylor believed boundaries could protect her. That restraint could neutralize risk. That her professional discipline as a therapist could somehow insulate her from emotional consequences. To Steffi, this belief was not optimism, it was delusion. She had seen too many people underestimate Sheila and pay for it with their peace, their safety, and sometimes their lives. Love, in this context, was not brave. It was reckless. Fear sharpened Steffi's resolve into something colder. She decided that if Taylor could not see the danger, she would be forced to confront it. Steffi did not act impulsively. She did not accuse. She did not plead. She began to collect proof. Images, messages, small, intimate moments captured without spectacle but heavy with implication. A hand held too long. A text sent too late at night. A shared smile that did not belong to friendship. Each piece of evidence felt like a betrayal. Yet Steffi told herself that betrayal in service of protection was still protection. What haunted Steffi most was not the act of surveillance, but the knowledge that she was preparing to expose her own mother. This was not about control or power. It was about containment. If Sheila saw the truth, Steffi reasoned, her anger would be immediate and unmistakable, and that very reaction might finally force Taylor to understand the magnitude of the risk she was taking. Steffi believed outrage could be a warning flare. She believed humiliation might save a life. When Steffi finally made the evidence public, the moment did not unfold the way she imagined. There was no immediate clarity, no protective awakening. Instead, the room filled with shock so thick it felt suffocating. Taylor's face did not register fear first. It registered disbelief, then fury. The realization that her daughter had documented her private moments, had exposed her vulnerability before others, landed not as concern, but as violation. Taylor did not see a daughter trying to protect her. She saw betrayal. She saw control disguised as love. She saw her autonomy stripped away in front of an audience that would now forever associate her with scandal and recklessness. For a woman who had spent her life rebuilding dignity after emotional devastation, the exposure felt like a public stripping of identity. Steffi's warning echoed too late, drowned out by Taylor's humiliation. The confrontation between mother and daughter fractured something fundamental. Taylor accused Steffi not of fear, but of arrogance, of believing she alone understood danger, of assuming her mother was incapable of discernment. Steffi, in turn, could not hide her desperation. She spoke of Sheila not as a possibility but as an inevitability. She spoke of patterns, of consequences, of blood already spilled in the name of obsession. Yet words spoken in public carry a different weight. Instead of protecting Taylor, they isolated her. And then, inevitably, Sheila saw everything. Sheila did not explode. She absorbed. She watched the evidence circulate, watched Taylor's composure fracture, watched Deacon attempt damage control that only confirmed guilt. To Sheila, the exposure was not the betrayal. The betrayal was that Deacon had allowed himself to be seen loving someone else openly, carelessly, without fear. That realization ignited something darker than rage. It ignited purpose. Sheila's retaliation did not begin with confrontation. It began with planning, with quiet calculations about leverage, about pressure points, about how to dismantle not just a relationship, but the people who believed they could exist beyond her reach. Taylor, once a symbol of moral superiority in Sheila's mind, became a target. Steffi, the architect of exposure, became an obstacle to be removed. The danger Steffi had feared did not dissipate. It multiplied. As Sheila's threat loomed larger, the rift between Steffi and Taylor widened into something almost unbridgeable. Taylor felt cornered, not only by Sheila's attention, but by the loss of trust in her own daughter. She stood between fear and pride, between the instinct to protect herself and the need to defend her autonomy. Every option felt like surrender. Steffy's warning echoed now, but it arrived tangled with resentment. Deacon, caught at the center of the storm, attempted reconciliation with sincerity that came too late. He tried to reassure Taylor, to reason with Steffy, to placate Sheila without igniting her suspicion further. Yet every move deepened his entrapment. He realized with growing dread that love, once exposed to fear and power struggles, becomes a liability. His desire to do right by everyone only confirmed that he could protect no one, not even himself. By the end of this unfolding collapse, nothing remained intact. Steffy's attempt to save her mother cost her their trust. Taylor's insistence on independence placed her in greater danger than before. Sheila's silence became more threatening than her anger. And Deacon stood between three forces: love, fear, and vengeance, knowing that whichever direction he turned, something irreversible would follow. In this world, protection does not always look like kindness. Sometimes it looks like betrayal. And sometimes, even betrayal is not enough to stop what has already begun. The silence that followed Steffy's exposure was far more dangerous than the chaos she had anticipated. There were no raised voices at first. No dramatic confrontations that might have burned the truth away in a single violent moment. Instead, the aftermath settled like ash, quiet, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. For Steffy, the realization came slowly and painfully. She had not forced clarity into the open. She had destabilized every fragile balance holding her family together. Taylor withdrew before she erupted. That withdrawal was what frightened Steffy most. Her mother did not argue, did not cry, did not attempt to justify herself. She simply closed ranks, retreating into a controlled composure that felt eerily similar to the emotional walls she had once built after other devastating losses. To Steffy, this was not strength. It was a warning sign. Taylor's silence was not peace, it was shock hardening into something colder. When Taylor finally confronted Steffy privately, the anger arrived sharpened by humiliation. She did not speak as a mother first, but as a woman stripped of dignity in public. She accused Steffy of weaponizing fear, of confusing protection with control, of believing that love entitled her to surveillance and exposure. Taylor's voice trembled not with weakness, but with the rage of someone who realizes too late that her autonomy has been violated by the very person who claimed to defend it. Steffy listened, absorbing the words like blows, because part of her knew they were not entirely untrue. She had crossed a line. She had justified it with fear, but fear does not absolve betrayal. Still, Steffy could not retreat from her central truth, that Taylor was now in real danger, and that anger would not shield her from what was coming. Steffy spoke of Sheila not as a hypothetical threat, but as a predator who thrived on emotional chaos. She spoke of patterns, of obsession disguised as reconciliation, of violence that waited patiently for the right opening. Yet Taylor heard none of it. All she heard was judgment. That rift between them widened when Sheila Carter made her first move, not openly, but deliberately. Sheila did not confront Taylor. She did not accuse Deacon. She began instead with observation. She appeared unexpectedly, positioned herself just close enough to remind everyone of her presence without revealing her intentions. Her calm was unsettling. To those who knew her history, it felt like the stillness before something catastrophic. Sheila's mind worked methodically. She replayed the evidence not to confirm betrayal. That much was already undeniable, but to understand the emotional architecture of it. She studied Taylor's expressions, Deacon's hesitation, Steffy's defiance. From this, she extracted leverage. Sheila did not want confrontation yet. She wanted dominance. And dominance, she knew, required patience. Taylor sensed the shift immediately. The fear Steffy had warned her about finally took shape, not as panic but as dread. Sheila's eyes lingered too long. Her questions sounded too gentle. Her interest felt surgical. Taylor began to understand that exposure had not neutralized the threat, it had invited it. Worse, it had stripped Taylor of plausible deniability. Sheila no longer needed to suspect. She knew. Caught between maternal fracture and looming danger, Taylor found herself increasingly isolated. Steffy's concern now felt complicated by resentment. Reaching out to her daughter meant acknowledging the truth Steffy had tried to force upon her. Yet distancing herself from Steffy meant standing alone in the face of someone she knew was capable of devastating retaliation. Taylor's professional instincts told her to analyze, to remain rational. Her emotional instincts told her to run. Neither offered safety. Deacon Sharp, watching the fallout, felt the weight of responsibility crush him. He had wanted connection, not destruction. Love, not war. Now he stood at the epicenter of a storm he could not control. His attempts to mediate only exposed how powerless he truly was. When he spoke to Steffy, He saw her fear transform into anger. Anger not just at him, but at the reality that adults she could not protect were now vulnerable because of choices she had tried to stop. With Taylor, Deacon felt something worse than guilt. He felt regret, not for loving her, but for believing that love alone could insulate them from consequence. He tried to reassure her, to promise protection, but promises rang hollow against the history Sheila carried like a weapon. Deacon began to understand that every reassurance he offered Taylor was another reason Sheila would want to destroy them both. As Sheila's presence became more frequent, the environment around Taylor changed. Friends became cautious. Conversations grew guarded. The unspoken question, how far will Sheila go this time, hung in the air. Taylor realized that she was no longer simply risking her own safety. She was endangering Steffy, her grandchildren, everyone connected to her. That realization shattered the last defense she had built against Steffy's warnings. Yet pride remained. Taylor could not fully surrender to fear without losing herself. She began to resent the position she had been forced into, where retreat felt like defeat, and defiance felt like provocation. Sheila thrived in that tension. Every time Taylor hesitated, Sheila advanced psychologically, tightening her grip without lifting a finger. Steffy watched this unfolding with mounting horror. She had hoped exposure would end the relationship. Instead, it had entrenched it in danger. She now faced the cruel irony of being right too early and wrong in method. Her relationship with her mother lay in ruins. Yet the threat she had tried to prevent loomed larger than ever. Steffy began to realize that protecting Taylor might now require a different kind of strength. Not exposure, but endurance. The tragedy of this phase was not marked by explosions but by erosion. Trust eroded between mother and daughter. Safety eroded under Sheila's gaze. Hope eroded in Deacon's belief that love could redeem past sins. And as the walls closed in, one truth became undeniable: some dangers cannot be exposed away. They must be survived. And Sheila, patient and precise, was just getting started.